Okay, so it's good to see everyone this morning. Just a class schedule update. There will not be class the next two Sundays because they are Erev holidays and religious schools closed. And I'll be here for Minyan, but then I'll be going home to drive to New York for the week to see family. And that includes the following Sunday, New Year's Eve. But the following Sunday, January 7th, I was hoping that we would have enough people to go on this volunteer solidarity mission. We were far from enough people, even with the other synagogue. They had two, we had three definites, and far from the minimum to make it affordable. So we're sorry about that, but there are other missions that JNF does for anybody who wants to go to do something like what we were going to be doing. And they have them every week until March. So I highly encourage people to do that if they want to do that volunteer mission. So no class next two Sundays. We'll be back together on January 7th. So now I'm going to share my screen, and there we go. Okay. It came up again. I don't want to do that. Okay. All right, so Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So this is where we left off at this red S, talking about still the contradiction between the Mishnah that said a couple of pages ago that you're not supposed to leave your animal in a non-Jewish inn overnight because of what non-Jews are assumed to do with animals, and a Baraita, a source from the time of the Mishnah, but not in the Mishnah, that says it's okay to buy an animal from a non-Jew for the purpose of sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem. So how do you reconcile, if you assume non-Jews do bad things to animals, then why can you buy an animal from them to be sacrificed on the altar in the temple in Jerusalem? Because animals that are sacrificed can't have things done to them that you're assuming non-Jews are doing to them. Okay, we'll get to the exact words for that in a moment, but I'm holding off on the X-rated term until we get to the text. Leave it to the rabbis to add the X-rated terms for us. Okay, so the red S. Earlier, Sheila, who's a rabbi from the time of the Mishnah, provided a rationale for Rabbi Eliezer's ruling that a red heifer may not be purchased from Gentiles. So so you have one statement that says can't leave an animal overnight at a non-Jewish inn. Another statement that says you can buy an animal from a non-Jew to offer as a sacrifice in a temple. But then what about the red heifer, which is a special sacrifice? Or you could argue it's just one of the many sacrifices that are offered, but it is a unique sacrifice. So maybe there's something special about the status of the red heifer that requires extra precaution. It's kind of like glot kosher versus regular kosher. So right, so that we're going to apply the glot kosher status to red heifer, but regular kosher status would be okay for other animals and other sacrifices. So earlier, Sheila provided a rationale for Rabbi Eliezer's ruling that a red heifer may not be purchased from Gentiles. The Gemara examines the matter itself. Sheila teaches in a Baraita. What is the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer? It is as it is written, speak unto the children of Israel that they take to you a red heifer. This indicates that the children of Israel take the red heifer, but Gentiles do not take the red heifer. Okay, so they're doing a very careful, narrow reading of the text from the book of Numbers, the chapter 19, which describes in great detail this purification ceremony for people who come into contact with the dead, which involves the slaughter and burning of the red heifer. So it says, speak unto the children of Israel that they take to you. And so the words in Hebrew, v'yikhu lachem, take to you, para aduma, a red heifer. This indicates that the children of Israel take the red heifer, but Gentiles do not take the red heifer. The Gemara asks, if that is so, then, then when the verse speaks, if that is so, then when the verse states with regard to the donations for the tabernacle, speak unto the children of Israel that they take for me, v'yikhu li, there, it's in Exodus 25, the same, so in Numbers about the red heifers, v'yikhu lachem, take to you. In Exodus 25, in the portion Truma, God is also speaking and saying, take for me an offering, v'yikhu li truma. So too, one can claim that only the children of Israel take an offering for God, but Gentiles do not take an offering, and that no items for the temple service may be purchased from Gentiles. So if you're going to apply the reasoning from based on the words, and we know that Gentiles are allowed to make offerings, and you can buy things from Gentiles for other offerings that are used in the temple. So we know that this reasoning is wrong. We can't apply this logic because then that would prohibit other things that we've so far permitted purchasing from Gentiles. Okay. Yes, Bess?
The word being used is take the heifer, take the sacrifice,
yes.
not bring.
Right.
And that's on purpose, I presume.
Well,
distinction.
It's just a semantic. So the upshot is that you are offering this sacrifice. So yeah, there are different words used for offering a sacrifice. So like in the beginning of Leviticus, describing all the standard sacrifices that would happen daily or almost daily. There's a particular, let me just get my Chumash down. So if I turn to the beginning of Leviticus, just a second here. Yeah, so takriv korban or lahakriv korban is to offer an offering. So that you have that phrase in Leviticus. So there are slightly different phrases that are used in different books of the Torah for describing the same thing. Does it mean anything different? Is the upshot different? Well, they're based on the wording in Numbers and Exodus. It's possible that they're learning that only Jews can buy from a Jew an animal for a sacrifice. Yes, Bess? No. Okay. So so here they're even though, yeah. So this. So let me just say this: when it comes to deriving law, the rabbis choose to focus on the specific language used, as opposed to, we could say, if we're not so keen on looking at the actual specifics of the law and each step of the law, we could just generalize from the language. It just means bringing a sacrifice. But because the rabbis are interested in actually every detail about the sacrifice, who you can buy it from, does it have to be Jewish owned, can it be non-Jewish owned, then they look at the language to derive those specific elements of bringing a sacrifice, right? So if we only care that historically that Jews brought a sacrifice, then it doesn't matter exactly what the wording is. But if we're interested in the actual legality of it, the halacha of it, then the wording becomes very important and significant when it's different phrases for different kinds of sacrifices. Okay, so, and if you would say that indeed that is so, this cannot be correct. That is, that only Jews, based on this, only Jews can buy from other Jews all things for all sacrifices, not just the red heifer. This cannot be correct. But doesn't Rav Yehuda say that Shmuel says the sages asked Rabbi Eliezer, to what extent must one exert himself to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring one's father and mother? Rabbi Eliezer said to them, go and see, oh, here's the story that I had mentioned last time about buying the red heifer from a non-Jew. Okay, so it just there's an end there for a note about to what extent must one exert himself to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring one's father and mother. The commentaries note that even according to the opinion that one does not have to exhaust his funds in the fulfillment of this mitzvah, no such leniency applies when honoring one's parents merely prevents a financial gain. Accordingly, if a Jew were placed in the situation of the Dama ben Natina in the story, he would likewise be obligated to refrain from waking his father. All right, we'll get to that in a moment. Let's read this story. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, go and see what a certain Gentile did for his father in Ashkelon, and his name is Dama ben Natina. Once the sages sought to purchase precious stones for him for the ephod of the high priest, so for 600,000 gold dinars profit. And Rav Kahana teaches that it was 800,000 dinars profit. Okay, so here's what the case is. The stones for the breastplate for the high priest needed to be purchased. Now, I don't know why. This is just interesting. Why isn't it there already? It should have been there already. It's, so just imagine the vestments for the Kohen Gadol are described in the Torah. So when the first temple is built by King Solomon, those vestments were designed and those stones were found in order to, well, it's possible that they already had them. It's just because the Mishkan was already there, and for several centuries already, the Kohen Gadol had this breastplate already. So why do they need a new one? They might have needed a new one after the returning from exile in Babylonia, and they didn't have the vestments, so they had to make them again. But it's still 500 years before the time of the rabbis. So this just puts into question the historical nature. Is this an accurate story? Because the details don't seem to make sense. They should have had it already. But they're teaching this story for a greater lesson, rather than for us to learn that they are making the breastplate at that time. Okay, so they knew about Dama ben Natina, who in Ashkelon, who was a precious stone dealer. Right, so it's interesting too. They had to go all the way from Jerusalem to Ashkelon to buy the precious jewels. You would think there would be a jeweler in Jerusalem. Why all the way to Ashkelon? And these precious stones, there are 12 different stones, one for each tribe in the breastplate. Either it's costing 600,000 gold dinars or 800,000 gold dinars or more, because that's the profit. But the keys to the chest holding the jewels were placed under his father's head, and he would not disturb him. So the situation is, rabbis are coming to a jeweler's shop in Ashkelon, wanting to buy these stones. The father is asleep. The son is manning the counter, and the son, the keys to the chest where these precious stones are being kept, it's like the combination to the safe is under his father's head. And he didn't want to wake him up in order to unlock the chest to make this pretty, it's like most important sale. It's evident from this story that the stones of the ephod may be purchased from Gentiles. If so, Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning cannot be based on Numbers 19:2, as an identical phrase appears in Exodus 25:2, and yet contributions to the tabernacle may be accepted from Gentiles. Okay, so the point of this story is to teach about honoring your parents, okay? But for this story, and that's why I said last week when we talked about this, I brought up the story. It was in another context about buying. Can you buy things from non-Jews? And so that's the thing here. If you're using the phrase "v'yikhu lachem" or "v'yikhu li," take for me, take for you, as to teach that only things to be used in a temple can only be purchased by Jews, then we know that this story disproves that statement, because the rabbis are going to a non-Jew to buy stones for the high priest's vestment. Okay, so the Gemara answers that the phrase onyx stones from Exodus 25, describing one of the stones for the breastplate, concluded discussion of that matter. In other words, almost all the items listed in Exodus chapter 25 for the contributions to the tabernacle are joined by the conjunction "and." Before the verse mentions the stones for the ephod, it states onyx stones without the conjunction "and." This omission serves to disconnect these stones from the earlier phrase "that they take," which means that the disqualification of items purchased from Gentiles for use in a temple derived from this phrase does not apply to the items listed after that point, including the stones of the ephod. So in other words, yes, the phrasing, the understanding of that phrase still applies, but it doesn't apply to stones because there's no "and" connecting the discussion before to the discussion of the stones. So therefore, stones, what we learn about purchasing the stones from non-Jews cannot be learned from what came before. It's a separate topic on its own, and therefore the stones are allowed to be purchased from a non-Jew. Okay, the Gemara asks, but isn't it subsequently written, "and stones to be set," by which the verse goes back and combines the list so that the earlier verse applies once more? So there's an "and" at the end of the list. Accordingly, it should be prohibited to purchase any of the items listed in the verse from Gentiles. The Gemara adds, and furthermore, the latter clause teaches, in a subsequent year, a red heifer was born in Dama's herd. The same Dama ben Natina, whose father is the jeweler in Ashkelon, he has a herd of cows, and a red heifer was born there. And the sages of Israel approached him, seeking to purchase the red heifer. So there you go. They were willing to buy a red heifer. They're thinking that it's kosher to do that from a non-Jew. Dama said to them, I know concerning you that if I were to ask from you all the money in the world, you would give it to me. Now I am requesting from you only that amount of money which I lost by refraining from waking my father. That is, right? You came to me for the jewels. I had to say no because I can't wake my father. But now I have this red heifer. So all I'm asking is the money that I lost in that sale. So that's a lot of money, by the way, 600,000 gold dinars or 800,000 dinars profit. This latter clause explicitly states that the sages intended to purchase a red heifer from a Gentile, which contradicts the ruling of Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara answers, there it was through the agency of Jewish merchants that they purchased the heifer. In other words, Jewish merchants purchased the heifer from Dama ben Natina, after which the sages acquired the animal from the merchants to be used as a red heifer of purification. In this manner, the animal was purchased for the purpose of an offering from Jews. In other words, there was a middleman there. So a Jew bought the red heifer from Dama ben Natina, and then the rabbis bought the red heifer from the Jew, which still gets to the problem of the animal originally being in the possession of a non-Jew, but perhaps the Jewish merchant asked a lot of questions about what happened every day in the life of this red heifer to ensure that there was no blemish and that the animal wasn't worked. But there's a little loophole here to say that no, the rabbis agree with Rabbi Eliezer and that you can only purchase a red heifer from a Jew. So, according to Sheila, Rabbi Eliezer's reason for not allowing a red heifer to be purchased from Gentiles is based on a derivation from a verse rather than a concern that a person may have engaged in bestiality with it. The Gemara therefore asks, and so in other words, for Rabbi Eliezer, it's it's okay to buy animals from non-Jews, but the verse says specifically you can't. So that's why we're not buying the animal from a non-Jew. The issue of bestiality is not the issue for Rabbi Eliezer. It's the wording of the verse that's the issue for him. So the Gemara therefore asks, and is Rabbi Eliezer not concerned about the possibility that a person has engaged in bestiality with the animal? The Gemara elaborates, but isn't it taught in a Baraita that the rabbis who hold that the heifer may be purchased from a Gentile said to Rabbi Eliezer there was an incident in which Jews purchased the red heifer from a Gentile, and Dama was his name, and some say Remetz was his name. In response to this claim, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, can one bring a proof from there? Certainly not, as Jews were safeguarding it from the time that it was born to ensure that a person did not engage in bestiality with it. So in other words, they knew that it was born on this non-Jewish farm, and so Jews asked permission to guard it until it's old enough to then be sold and used as the red heifer sacrifice. So there was Jewish guarding of the animal to ensure that it can be used. Contrary to the opinion of Sheila, it is evident from here that Rabbi Eliezer was concerned about this possibility. The Gemara explains that Rabbi Eliezer has two requirements. The purchase of the red heifer must be from a Jew, and he's also concerned about the possibility that a person had engaged in bestiality with the animal. Okay, so now continue. The Gemara analyzes Rabbi Eliezer's statement. The master said, Jews were safeguarding the red heifer purchased from Dama ben Natina from the time that it was born. The Gemara asks, and let us be concerned that perhaps Gentiles engaged in bestiality with the mother while she was pregnant. As Rava says, the offspring of an animal that gored and killed a Jew is forbidden as an offering, as it's considered as if she and her offspring together gored. And similarly, the offspring of an animal that was the object of bestiality is forbidden because it's considered as if a person engaged in bestiality with both her and her offspring. The Gemara answers say that Rabbi Eliezer meant that Jews were safeguarding it from the time that it was conceived. Now, that's kind of impossible because, so they're adding another layer here of prohibition. So if bestiality is done to an animal, the animal that's born after that is also forbidden. So you would think the animal born, nothing was done to it. But since something was done to the mother, the offspring of the mother is also considered prohibited. So now they're saying, so how do we deal with that layer of law to this red heifer case? And the answer is that the rabbis were safeguarding the cow from the time that they knew it was mating season and a bull would be brought in. So my issue with this is you don't know which animal is going to give birth to a red heifer because it's unusual. And so are they guarding all female cows in the entire land of Israel? That's impossible, and nearly impossible to do. It's one thing on Jewish farms to be aware of it. It's another thing to then be watching non-Jewish farms about this. So this is unlikely, but so they're offering that Rabbi Eliezer is suggesting that even from the moment of conception, Jews were watching it. The Gemara asks, and let's be concerned that perhaps they engaged in bestiality with the mother from the outset, that is, before conception, as we learned in a Mishnah, with regard to all animals that are disqualified for the altar, such as one that was the object of bestiality. Sacrifice of their offspring is permitted. And it's taught with regard to this case, the Rabbi Eliezer prohibits their offspring from being sacrificed on the altar. Okay, so we have this other Mishnah that says, no, offspring of such animals that had that bestiality was done to them are permitted. So, but Rabbi Eliezer takes the stringent position saying, I'm going to prohibit it, but the rabbis permit it. So, and it is taught with regard to this, it prohibits their offspring being sacrificed. If this is the case, Rabbi Eliezer should agree that there's a concern that a person might have engaged in bestiality with the heifer's mother at some point before its birth. Okay, so in other words, now we're thinking that there's a leniency. Rabbis are saying it's okay. Offspring of an animal that had bestiality performed on it is okay. Eliezer says no. The Gemara clarifies the difficulty. Granted, this works out well according to the opinion of Rava. As Rava says, that Rav Nachman says the dispute between the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer applies only when a person engaged in bestiality with the animals when they were consecrated, and then they conceived. As Rabbi Eliezer holds that in that case, the offspring are disqualified from being sacrificed as offerings. But if someone engaged in bestiality with the animals when they were non-sacred, everyone agrees that the offspring are permitted. Accordingly, it needs to be ascertained only that no one engaged in bestiality with the mother after she was consecrated. Okay, so now an extra layer, was the animal consecrated or not? And if it was consecrated, then if bestiality is done to it, then it's prohibited. But if it's not consecrated, then anything goes, or really it doesn't matter what happens to it. Only a physical blemish, not so bestiality doesn't add a blemish to the animal. But according to the opinion of Rav Huna bar Chinana, who says that Rav Nachman says the dispute applies only when a person engaged in bestiality with the animals when they were non-sacred. But if someone engaged in bestiality with them when they were consecrated, everyone agrees that the offspring are forbidden. What is there to say? According to this opinion, Rabbi Eliezer should be concerned that a person might have engaged in bestiality with the animal prior to conception. The Gemara answers, say that Jews were safeguarding it as well, that is, the mother of the red heifer, from the time that it was conceived. The Gemara challenges, and let us be concerned that perhaps someone engaged in bestiality with the mother of the heifer's mother. So there's the grandmother cow is also an issue. Gemara responds, we're not concerned to such an extent. So an offspring of the offspring of bestiality animal is okay. The offspring of a bestiality animal is not okay. But the grandchild of the original animal that had bestiality to it is okay. Okay. Gemara discusses the revised version of Rabbi Eliezer's statement. The master said above, Jews were safeguarding the red heifer from the time that it was conceived. The Gemara asks, from where do we know that the mother would give birth to a red heifer, which would warrant safeguarding her, right? How do you know that such an unusual animal is going to be born? There was no such thing as genetic testing to know if this blonde animal and this brunette animal are going to give birth to a redhead animal. You just don't know that. So that means every animal has to be, that's what I was saying before, every animal would have to be safeguarded. Rav Kahana says they would pass a red cup before her while the male mounts her, an act that would cause the offspring to be red. Okay, so there are bizarre things like this throughout the Talmud how you can foreordain something to happen. Okay, there's whole section in the Gemara about dreams and what the dreams mean if you have a particular dream. And then you can affect the dreams you have by certain foods that you eat. If you eat this food, then this kind of dream you're going to have. So there are lots of things about how to ensure that you're going to have a boy, how you're going to have a girl, you're going to have a blue-eyed boy, a brown-eyed boy, etc., etc. So lots of things in the Gemara about things like this. So you pass a red cup before an animal. So clearly this did not work because there would be lots of red heifers around Israel if this simple thing were to work. So in other words, a cattle rancher would have a supply of red cups on hand. And whenever it was mating season and he brought out the bull, all he had to do was wave a red cup there while the animals were going at it. Then and then a red heifer would be born. Again, it's ridiculous because it did not. So this is what he suggests, though, was the case. So don't think that all animals were being guarded by Jews throughout the land of Israel. It's this specific case when the red cup was being used. The Gemara asks, if that is so, and the birth of a red heifer can be induced in such a simple manner, why is its price so expensive? That's like what I'm saying. Everybody would do it, and there'd be tons of red heifers around. The Gemara answers, since two hairs of a different color render the red heifer unfit, this method is unreliable, right? So it might produce a red-haired animal, but it won't be 100% red-haired. And for the red heifer, it has to be 100% red-haired. The Gemara asks another question. And what's the difference? What is different about these cows? Why did the Jews resort to purchasing the red heifer from a Gentile when they could have induced its conception themselves? Rav Kahana said, Dama ben Natina owned a herd of cattle that were known to beget red heifers, and therefore they preferred to employ the aforementioned method with one of his cows. So Dama ben Natina had he had genetically engineered his cows to produce red cows, but they weren't always 100% red-haired. So by doing the red cup method to these genetically modified cows that are already prone to giving birth to red cows, then this method worked to make it 100% red. Okay. Now a red S. So hopefully we're changing this topic from the red heifer. The Gemara relates, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha were sitting on Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha's porch. One of them began and said that the Baraita teaches, and similarly, Rabbi Eliezer would disqualify all offerings purchased from Gentiles due to the concern that a person had engaged in bestiality with the animals. The other one of them began and said, what did Rabbi Eliezer's colleagues respond to him? Okay, so if Eliezer disqualified, that's his is a more stringent opinion. All animals, all offerings purchased from right, it's all animals purchased from Gentiles are forbidden to be brought to the temple because you're suspecting bestiality. So now the question is, what's the other? How did rabbis respond to Rabbi Eliezer? They quoted the verse, all flocks of Kedar shall be gathered unto you. The rams of Nevayot shall minister unto you. They shall come up with acceptance from upon my altar. This was a verse that was quoted a couple pages before as a proof text from Isaiah that animals from non-Jews are okay, right? So that's all flocks of Kedar. Kedar is some other place. It's not Israel. Shall be gathered together unto you. The rams of Nevayot shall minister unto you. So that's the verse, ministering unto you. That, in other words, you can use the rams for sacrifice. This verse clearly indicates that offerings will be accepted from Gentiles. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, in the future, all Gentiles will be calculating converts. That is, those who converted for personal gain, and as converts, they will not be suspected of engaging in bestiality. So there's a note there what calculating converts is. No, where is that? there's an end there. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Here, calculating converts. Rashi explains that this phrase, explains this phrase in light of the Gemara back on page 3b, which states that Gentiles will no longer be accepted as converts in Messianic times. Instead, they will be drawn toward Judaism of their own accord and behave like Jews. According to this interpretation, the fact that the converts will be calculating is irrelevant to the Gemara's discussion here, as the point is simply that there will no longer be a concern that the animal might have engaged in bestiality, nor will there be a problem with accepting offerings from Gentiles. See Rabbeinu Hananel, who deletes the word gerurim altogether. He just keeps it as gerim and just as converts, not calculating converts. Alternatively, the main point of Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that the converts are insincere. Consequently, they are not proper Jews at all, and it's for this very reason that their offerings will be accepted, as the invalidation of an animal because it engaged in bestiality does not apply to the offerings of Gentiles. Okay, so just different understandings here about what this means. In the future, all Gentiles will be calculating converts, meaning, according to the editor of our edition of the Talmud in the smaller print, the non-bolded print, those who converted from personal gain and as converts, they'll not be suspected of engaging in bestiality. So, in other words, the only Gentiles from whom you can accept sacrifices will be those Gentiles who convert to Judaism, no matter what the circumstances of the conversion are. Rav Yosef said, what's the verse from which it is derived that they will convert? So how do you know that this Isaiah 60 is talking about converts? The verse states, for then will I turn to the peoples a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. So from a different prophet, Zephaniah. This verse indicates that all nations will worship God. Abaye said to him, but perhaps it's only from idol worship that they will withdraw, while they will still engage in forbidden sexual relations, including bestiality. Rav Yosef said to him, that cannot be, as it is written at the conclusion of the verse, to serve him with one consent, which indicates that the Gentiles will accept all of God's mitzvot, and they will forego bestiality. Okay. There's another note there, to serve with one consent. This verse teaches that in Messianic times, there will be no differences between the nations with regard to worship of God, as the Gentiles will behave like Jews in all regards. You know, that's what we sing at the end of Aleinu every time. Bayom hahu yiyer Adonai echad u'shemo echad. So that's from Zechariah, at that time all will come to Jerusalem and declare that God is one and his name is one. Okay, so there's this idea from the prophets that in the time of Messiah, everybody will be worshiping like Jews. The Gemara. Yes, go ahead, Marlene.
Yeah, but I don't know. So I thought if a Gentile converted to Judaism, aren't they considered a Jew? Is that more recent? I mean, you're not even supposed to like mention that they were once not.
Right. So that's the whole conversation about that in another part of the Gemara, about how you're supposed to treat a convert and not remind the convert of their non-Jewish past. So yes, there is that. And so I think this is reminding us of the different ideas that the rabbis have about converts. Are they really should they be fully accepted into the Jewish community, or are they partly still Gentile? So like there's a question, does a convert sit Shiva for a parent after the person converts and then his parent dies? Does a convert sit Shiva and have a Jewish funeral and all that? So up until modern times, there was a debate about whether a convert needs to sit Shiva or not. And the answer is from the Sephardi chief rabbi, Ovadia Yosef. He says that a convert can and should sit Shiva for a non-Jewish parent. So, but the question, that this question remains as part of Jewish tradition over the centuries. And there isn't a clear 100% answer because it all gets back to the inherent distrust that Jews have of non-Jews. And the distrust mainly formed from centuries of persecution and oppression and living as a minority within a majority population that is anti-Semitic. So why trust anyone to convert to Judaism? Like there must be something wrong with them to leave a majority safer, powerful culture to join a persecuted, oppressed minority. So that's the sense behind the judging the sincerity of Gentile conversions. So the Gemara comments, Rav Papa teaches that discussion in this manner, Rav Papa teaches that discussion in this manner, but Rav Zevid teaches it in this manner. Both Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha said, and similarly, Rabbi Eliezer would disqualify all offerings taken from Gentiles. And both said, what did Rabbi Eliezer's colleagues respond to him? They quoted the verse, all flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together unto you. The rams of Nevayot shall minister unto you. They shall come up with acceptance upon my altar. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, all Gentiles will be calculating converts in the future. Rabbi Eliezer continues, and what is the verse from which it is derived that they will convert? It is from the verse, from then will I turn to the peoples of pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. Rav Yosef objects to this proof, but perhaps it's only from idol worship that they will withdraw. Abaye said to him, that cannot be, as it is written, to serve him with one consent. Okay, so the same argument now, that everybody's agreeing with this argument, that in the future time, their conversion will mean that they will no longer be engaging in bestiality. Okay. So it's 10:15. I guess we can go on a little bit longer. So another new topic. The Gemara cites a series of verses which present difficulties with regard to the claim that animals purchased from Gentiles may not be used as offerings. The Gemara raises an objection from the following verse. And Moses said, you must also give into our hand offerings and burnt offerings that we may sacrifice unto the Lord our God. So in other words, in Exodus 10, in the process of Moses trying to convince Pharaoh to let everyone go, he's asking for animals from the Egyptians to be used for sacrifices. Therefore, here's a verse that says it's okay to get animals from non-Jews for sacrifices. Moses demanded that Pharaoh provide the Jews with offerings despite the fact that he was a Gentile. The Gemara explains the halacha prior to the giving of the Torah was different, as at that time it was acceptable to use animals taken from Gentiles as offerings. So you can explain it away. It's before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. Different rules applied then. Okay. The Gemara raises another objection. Come and hear a proof from the verse, and Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and offerings for God. So here, Moses' father, who's a Midianite priest, offered offerings to God. And here, it's just of Exodus 18. It's right before Mount Sinai happens in Exodus 19. Yitro was not a Jew, and yet he brought offerings for God. The Gemara answers the incident with Yitro was also prior to the giving of the Torah. The Gemara observes, granted, this works out well according to the one who says that the incident with Yitro was prior to the giving of the Torah, but according to the one who says that the incident involving Yitro was after the giving of the Torah, what is there to say? How could they accept offerings from him? Rather, it must be that Yitro purchased the animals from a Jew. So Yitro offered, but he didn't offer his own animal. He bought the animal from a Jew to then be offered at that altar that existed at that time before the Mishkan was built. The Gemara further states, come and hear another objection from a verse. And Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the flock and of the herd to sacrifice unto the Lord your God. So here in 1 Samuel, the Mishkan already exists. This is right before the kings. It's like maybe 50 years before the temple was built in Jerusalem. Still, you have the Mishkan, a central shrine. And here they're taking animals from the Amalekites of all people, the arch enemy of the people, and offering them to God. The verse states explicitly that the Israelites intended to sacrifice animals previously owned by Gentiles. The Gemara explains, what's the meaning of the phrase, the best? This is referring to the monetary value of the best livestock. The intention was not to sacrifice the animals themselves, but to sell them and use the proceeds of the sale to purchase other animals to sacrifice as offerings. So here you can think that this is a proof that it's okay to buy animals from non-Jews, but this is disproved. They're selling those animals for money and then using that money to buy animals from Jews for sacrifices. The Gemara inquires, and what is different about the best animals? If the animals were sold for their value, why sell those animals in particular rather than several inferior quality animals? The Gemara explains that they did so in order that buyers would jump at the opportunity to buy superior quality livestock. In other words, it's easier to sell one superior quality animal than several inferior quality ones. Come in here another objection from a verse, and Aravna, that's how it's pronounced. The U there is so in Hebrew, Aravna. So, and Aravna said unto David, let my lord the king take and offer up what seems good unto him. Behold, the cattle for the burnt offering, and the threshing instruments, and the accoutrements of the cattle for the wood. So, here's a non-Jew, apparently, who's offering all these animals to David and other objects to be used to offer to God. So, apparently, David was willing to accept oxen as offerings from a Gentile. Rav Nachman says Arvana was a Gentile who resided in Eretz Yisrael and observed the 7 Noahide mitzvot. The 7 Noahide mitzvot include the prohibition against engaging in bestiality, and therefore Arvana was not suspected of this practice. So you'd think that here's a case that they did buy from a non-Jew, but no, he wasn't a non-Jew, he was a convert. Tangentially, the Gemara asks, what's the meaning of the term morigim? So these are threshing instruments mentioned in this verse. Ula said it is a turbil bed. The Gemara asks, what's a turbil bed? It's a serrated board used for threshing. And here's a picture of a serrated board used for threshing, which was called a korkasa, from the Greek kirkos, meaning a circle. One of its meanings is a wheel used for threshing. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's this. The threshing board's here, from the Greek tribolos, one of whose meanings is a heavy board with a serrated bottom that threshes as it is dragged by an animal. All right, so the serrated thing, you put the wheat there, whatever, this goes on top, it does what it needs to do. Okay, Rav Yosef said, what's the verse from which the meaning of morigim is derived? It's derived from the verse, behold, I have made you a new threshing board, having sharp teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and beat them small, and shall make the hills as chaff. Okay. The Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. After the Philistines returned the Ark of the Covenant to the Israelites upon a cart drawn by cattle, the verse states, and they sacrificed the cattle as a burnt offering unto the Lord. So here's another example of using Philistine animals, non-Jewish animals, as a burnt offering to God. Evidently, the Jews did not hesitate to sacrifice the Philistines' animals. The Gemara explains, there it was a provisional edict issued in extraordinary circumstances, and their actions are not representative of the general halacha. So in other words, don't derive, that was a special case, and it's not meant to derive general halacha from it. Okay, the Gemara adds, this also stands to reason, as if you do not say so, one can raise a further difficulty with this episode. Is there a female burnt offering? Only males may be sacrificed as burnt offerings. Since the Jews sacrificed the cows as burnt offerings, it's clear that they were acting unconventionally due to extenuating circumstances. Okay, The Gemara, well, okay, I think we have time for these 2 paragraphs and then we'll stop. The Gemara rejects this proof. What's the difficulty? In other words, the additional problem with the incident that the animals were female, which is cited as proof that there were extenuating circumstances, is not in fact difficult at all. The Gemara elaborates, perhaps the cows were offered upon a private altar, and this is in accordance with the opinion of Rav Ada bar Ahava. As Rav Ada bar Ahava says, from where is it derived that a female burnt offering is fit to be sacrificed upon a private altar? As it is stated, and Samuel took a milking lamb and sacrificed it for a burnt offering unto the Lord. The phrase milking lamb indicates that it was a female, and yet Samuel sacrificed it upon a private altar. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but the word vaya'alehu is masculine, right? Offered it. But the it, there's no it. There's no neutral gender in Hebrew. The it in Hebrew is either a masculine it or a female it. It should have said vaya'aleha if it's a female animal, vaya'aleha. Since it says vaya'alehu, offered him, not her. So, but the word vaya'alehu is masculine, which means that the lamb was male. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, although the word is read in the masculine, it's written in the feminine form, vaya'ala, which teaches that even a female lamb may be sacrificed on a private altar. Okay, so we'll stop here for today, and hopefully we'll get into bigger issues about non-Jews next time. So I wish everybody a good rest of the day and a good week. And again, we'll see everybody again on January 7th. So Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy, healthy, stay safe.
Okay, thank you.
Good travels and a good vach.